Hi everyone, welcome back. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, then I'll just do kind of a quick recap. My name's Jana and I am a textile science student at the University of Alberta. And this summer I'm kind of just doing some self-motivated experiments with stinging nettles to see if I can get some usable fiber and yarn from them. I had originally been so bold as to think that maybe I could even get some fabric going, but it's now August 1st and I don't think that's gonna happen this summer. So yarn is the goal. A little over a month ago, I harvested my first batch of nettles from my family's farm here in northern Alberta. And I made some mistakes in the retting process, which meant that the fiber that I got from them was pretty unusable. But it was kind of a fun time and a good learning experience anyway. So I've done a little bit of research since then, not really as much as I would have liked, but I've had some other things going on this summer too. I'm so sorry if you can really hear the wind on the microphone. It's supposed to thunderstorm later today. So I'm hoping that I can harvest my second batch of nettles before that starts happening, because that would be good. Yeah, so I did some research. I watched some YouTube videos from people who have been working with nettles a lot longer than I have, and I also looked up a couple of academic papers on nettles. So and I have a bunch more resources that I want to look into as well and keep researching. But for this video, I'll include everything that I looked at down in the description so that you can also learn from those people who know what they're doing way more than I do too. Yeah, I just want to show you some of the things that I'm going to be using today because they are different from what I used last time. So a few of these things will look familiar from my previous videos. I've got my leather gloves to protect my hands from the stinging parts of the nettle. Some of the videos that I looked at had these very brave people from the UK who just don't wear gloves at all when they are working with stinging nettles. So I am not that brave. So I just grabbed a pair of these nitrile gloves that I originally used for coloring my hair. Yeah, just to increase my bravery, I guess. I've also got this burlap bag just for carrying all of the nettles that I harvest. Some long sleeves that I'm not wearing right now because it actually is quite warm today. My rubber boots that you'll know I did not wear in the first video and my feet got really wet. I did wear them in the second video and my feet still got really wet, so I'm hoping that today I can wear them and my feet can stay dry. That would be lovely. I also have this pair of secateurs that I've borrowed from my sister. The last time I harvested nettles, I just pulled them up straight from the root and then ended up cutting the root off anyway. And I've learned since then that some of the fibers that are like closer to the bottom of the stalk aren't really that great for like textile fibers. So most people just cut nettles off a few inches above the roots. So that's what I'm going to do today. It also helps the root systems get stronger and produce more nettles from that same stalk. So that sounds good to me. These are for a different kind of processing that I'm going to try today. The last time I harvested nettles, I used the process of pond retting where I put them in a lake for, well, I put them in for too long. It was about a week and a half, but it should be more closer to a week. And and then after that tried to remove the fibers. But some people just remove the fibers while the nettles are still green, like immediately after harvesting. So I want to try that with a few of the nettles that I gathered today. And that involves scraping them with a butter knife on a wooden board. I happened to find this cutting board and these old butter knives in the basement, so I'm gonna see if those work out for me. This one has a little bit of serration and this one does not. I think this one will work better, but I do just want to try both and see how it goes. And then finally, last time when I did pond ret the nettles, I put them in a pond that was like kind of tricky to get to and smelled really bad. And then my sister told me I could just borrow this lovely blue tub and ret them in there, and it actually looks quite similar to one that I saw in another video. So I'm just gonna do that, and hopefully that'll be a lot easier. Probably not that much less smelly, because rotting things just smell, and that's what happens when you ret nettles, but hopefully that'll work well. Tucker, look over here. The people want to say hello. Hi. What? You clearly had breakfast today, and you still have water. So you're fine. What do you think Tucker wants, huh? Really interesting. Hey, Shadow, you are coming down. You're not gonna get close enough for me to touch you, though, are you? Oh, look at this bravery. A whole 6 feet away. Ash, you gonna come down? Come on. Okay, bye. I hit a couple of different spots while I was harvesting nettles this time, and none of the same spots that I went to the first time. I tried to look for nettles that were tall and straight, but a lot of them that I found, especially in this patch, had a lot of branches coming off of them, which is not good for textile fibers. I did go back to my leather gloves really quickly. I tried the nitrile gloves, but I did actually sting myself a couple of times through the gloves, and I'm just kind of a wimp, so I took them off and wore the leather gloves for the rest of the time. All right, so I've harvested my nettles. I went to a few different spots around the farm and got some. I don't think I actually collected as many this time as I did last time, which is okay because they are actually taller this time. The last time is the end of June, so they were still growing. Now it's the beginning of August, so I mean they'll probably still grow some more, but they're definitely taller and more mature. Part of why I didn't get as many also is that the last patch that I harvested was just over here, and a lot of them were like this one. They had like a lot of branches coming off, and branched nettles, I have learned, are not really the best for fiber making because the fibers are particularly weak at, well, oh no, where did it? Right there. At the joints where the branches come off. So that's just not ideal. So I mean, I did harvest some that are kind of branchy, so we'll see how that goes, but I had to leave a lot of them, which is not really what I was expecting, but that's okay. I still got a lot, and yeah, I think I'm gonna try and save about 15 or 20 and try and just process them while they're green, and the rest I'll put in this tub that I have beside me and fill it with water and get started on the retting process, which I'll tell you more about later as the week progresses. I don't know what I'm gonna do to process these green nettles because everyone in the videos just does it with their bare hands, and I cannot do that. So one person whose name I'm totally blanking on right now, I'm so sorry. He talked about like basically like removing the leaves and the stingers by I'll just show you. Where's a nice straight one? Here. By basically like having leather gloves, or he had like a separate square of leather aside from his gloves, and just like he just ran it up and down the nettles a couple of times, and that I guess got rid of like the stinging hairs and the leaves as well. So then it ends up like this. I still see hairs, so I don't know what to do. I mean, I guess I'll try and rub as many as possible off, and then probably still wear the nitrile gloves when I'm actually processing them, and hopefully I just don't get any more stings. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Oh, one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is some of the research that I was doing more in terms of like academic papers that I was reading. And I think I only read like 2 or 3. I was hoping to get through more before I did this again. But one of the interesting things I noticed is the difference between like the YouTube videos that I was watching and the academic papers I was reading, where the YouTube videos, the people who were doing that were really more interested in like the history of nettle fiber, which has been around for tens of thousands of years. I think in my first video I said hundreds of years, and at that point I already knew that that was incorrect. My mouth just said hundreds instead of thousands. But yeah, been around for thousands of years, so they're really interested in learning about like the techniques and where those fabrics were used, things like that, and learning about it by doing it. Which I'm a big fan of because I did 4-H and their motto is learn to do by doing. So that's great. What was I saying? On the other hand, the academic papers, like some of them do talk about the history, which is super interesting, but when they are talking about like the production of fiber from nettle plants, they seem to be more interested in it from like a commercial aspect. So how can we get stinging nettles, which are generally kind of like I don't really want to say a garbage plant, but they're like a plant that grows kind of on the edges of things, in ditches or on rock piles, or kind of around like the refuse of human activity. How can we get those to grow the way that we grow other crops in fields so that we can harvest them on a mass scale and produce fiber on a mass scale? And I don't really know how I feel about that. In my first video, I mentioned that nettle fiber might be like a really cool, sustainable option for textiles. That being said, let me just preface this by saying that I am not an expert, even in textile science yet, but certainly not in agriculture or you know, economics. I did take a microeconomics course though, and a macroeconomics course, but let's not talk about that one. And nor am I an expert on, like sustainability or things like that. So I just have this, it's not really a sense. I think that when people have set crops up, any kind of crops, as a monoculture in a location. So even, for example, like a field of wheat. Generally, you don't want anything else to grow in that field of wheat. You just want the wheat there. I think that the work that has been done to clear those fields, to like spray the weeds in terms of like deterring, or yeah, to spray in terms of deterring weeds or insects or whatever. Even maybe sometimes some of the like modifications to the wheat seeds themselves to get them to grow better. I don't think a lot of that has been particularly beneficial other than in terms of economically, and mostly for like really, really big producers or like producers of maybe like some of the chemicals or the seeds or things like that. I don't think it's been good for the environments where that happens, because you never see just a monoculture growing in nature. There's always biodiversity in nature, and just the way that people are dependent on each other as much as we're trying to be independent. Plants are also dependent on one another, and I think when you take a plant out of its natural ecosystem and dependence on the plants and animals and other things around it, I think you're actually doing damage. And so I feel like if we're going to start producing nettle fabric on a commercial scale in a way that just takes nettles from the natural places that they would grow and puts them in rows in a field without, I mean, one of the papers did talk about kind of like cover crops and things like that, which are, if I understand correctly, they're kind of like these other plants that do grow maybe like shorter than nettles would grow to kind of like help nourish the soil and the nettles, and to prevent erosion and things like that. But there's still like, it's a very limited kind of diversity there. Yeah, I just don't know if that's really where we should go with nettles. Then again, if there's like demand for tons and tons of textiles, I also don't think we should be relying on synthetic textiles or even kind of like traditional natural textiles like commercial cotton that has also caused a lot of environmental harm because of the way that it's grown commercially. So really, the solution to, I mean, a lot of the environmental impacts of textiles is to consume less, because especially in, I don't really know the correct terms right now, the Western world or the global north, we really do consume way more textiles than anyone ever did historically. And you know, there's all these terms like fast fashion, disposable fashion, and it's just so true that those things are not helpful, and they are driven by demand from consumers. And I mean, I have very little reach with these videos. So me saying this is probably not really going to make that much of a difference. But I do think that we need to consume fewer textiles. And I know that that may have consequences for like the people in, say, like the global south who produce textiles, like the people who are actually working in the factories or on the farms to do that. If we have less demand for them, then where do they have their jobs? I don't know. I don't think there are any easy answers, including less consumption, for any of these issues, which is definitely super frustrating. But yeah, it's definitely something that we need to figure out a better way of doing this thing of wearing clothes and using textiles. That's my very long rant. I wasn't really expecting it to go that long, but yeah, I think I just started by saying that was a really interesting difference between the YouTube videos that were more about like kind of small, maybe personal production of textile fabric and really interested in history, as opposed to the academic papers that may also be interested in the history, but also seem to be quite interested in figuring out how to get stinging nettles to grow commercially for textile use. All right, so here's what I'm left with in terms of the nettle stalks. This is everything that I pulled off, so mostly leaves, but then also like a couple of the shorter branches or like tops of the stalks that broke off. So this I'm gonna take up to our compost pile in the garden. I had kind of thought of using the leaves for like cooking or making a tea or something, because you can do that with nettle leaves, but I just don't feel like doing that right now. So maybe later on I'll go back to the patch where too many of the nettles were branchy and I can just harvest some of the leaves off of there. My dad and his siblings have been telling me that my Oma used to use, I'm pretty sure it was the leaves. There are differing stories about whether she dried them or cooked them or both, but basically used them as like a topical treatment for arthritis. So that would be cool. I don't have any arthritis, but I mean, other people in my family do, so maybe I can make some of that for them, and that could be cool. But I'm not going to do it today because, like I said, I just don't feel like it. And it is a holiday Monday, so I don't really want to do like a lot of work today. I kind of just need a break. So I'm going to take these up to the compost pile and then come back and fill up the tub with some water. I'm going to use some rain barrel water so that I just don't like drain my parents' water supply, basically, because they don't have a well. They have to like truck in their water. And I just think rainwater would work maybe particularly well, maybe better than treated water. I have like no evidence to back that up at all. But I'm gonna use some rainwater from our rain barrels. Put some of the nettles in the tank and get them started on the retting process, and then I'll come back on here for some green processing of nettles, which I'm still very nervous about. So here I am just bruising all along the length of the nettles, which is something that Sally Pointer suggests doing in her videos. I'm just using like the handle end of the butter knife to do this. She uses a different tool, but the handle of the knife worked really well for me. Bruising the nettle like that, and especially at the nodes, which are kind of the points that you can see that maybe leaves would come out of, or they're kind of like the stops in the stalk. Bruising the nettle helps it to split and helps the fibers to be ready to pull away from the pith. So here I've just split the fiber right down the stalk. And some of the fibers are already stripping off like practically on their own as I split the stalk, which is really great. The bruising really helped this process. So the next thing I'm going to do is just remove the woody pith, which is kind of the same thing that I was doing in my second video if you've seen it, but it's just a lot more successful this time because I'm actually getting long fibers coming away from the pith. It is important to go particularly slowly when pulling the fibers across a node, just because that's where they do tend to stick or be weaker. So that's kind of what the bruising helps, is to already start to remove them from those areas so that they don't break when you're pulling them off. But it's still important to go slow and just, be careful. So just like before, I'm snapping the woody pith in different places, pulling it away from the fibers in like relatively short pieces, and doing that all along the length of the stalk. And that's what I've got. I'm pretty pleased with it. Okay, so I saved 15 stalks from the Reading tab, and um I guess I'll have explained that already, but I peeled off the woody pith, this stuff, from the outer bark. And here's I think where I guess like book learning and application comes into play, because I am one of those people that like the education system that we have just really works for me, and I do well in school and with book learning. But then doing these nettle experiments this summer, I realized that like I don't actually understand bast fibers, so like the fibers that come from the stems of plants, as well as I thought I did, just like reading about them and taking exams. So I I kind of knew that there's like the woody pith of the stalk, and then there's the fibers, and then there's like this pectiny gluey stuff that holds the fibers together. But as I was watching some of the YouTube videos and reading some things over the past couple weeks, I've realized that that kind of everything outside of the woody pith is called in, or like there are some people who call it the bark, which I'm a little unclear on this, but I think it kind of like includes the fibers, but also you want to separate the fibers from the bark. So it's kind of like actually a two-step process of separating the fibers, first from the pith and then from the bark. And when you ret them, it's the bark that kind of rots away, not the woody pith. And so that's kind of what I've learned, whereas I kind of thought that it was like a one-step process. The pith is what's supposed to rot away, and it doesn't, which is why I let it ret for too long last time. But yeah, when you're processing fibers, when they're green, you remove them from the pith first, which I've done, and you saw me doing that. And then this is what I have left. And so all of this green and purple stuff is still the bark that needs to be removed or scraped away from the fibers, which I've started doing here on this just wooden cutting board. So here you might be, I hope you can see that the fibers are quite light in color. They're like pretty creamy, whereas like this more greenish stuff is what I've been scraping away. So I tested out those two butter knives that I showed you near the beginning. This one that has no serration at all did nothing, so I put that aside pretty quickly. And then this one has been doing more for me. So it is, I think, okay, one of the things that appealed to me about processing the fibers when they're still green is kind of like the instant gratification of having like pretty workable fibers basically the same day that you harvest them. However, it ends up being like quite a long day between like harvesting the fibers, removing the leaves and everything, and then removing the bark from the pith, and then removing the bark from the fibers, all while they're still pretty green. So I don't know if I'm going to end up scraping all of this today. I might actually let most of it dry and kind of scrape it later, which is, I don't think you're really supposed to do that, but I'm just not going to get it all done today. I probably should have set aside like 5 nettles to try this instead of 15. But yeah, this is what I've got so far in terms of fibers. I think this is about how scraped I want all of the rest of this to be, which will take some time. I started from like, this would have been the bottom of the stalk, and I've been kind of like scraping towards the bottom, and there has been quite a bit of fiber that kind of gets scraped off in the process along with the bark that breaks off, especially at those nodes, or is just kind of already broken and short. And there's kind of been more breaking off than I thought there might be or hoped there might be. And part of me is wondering if I should have started at the other end and if that would make a difference. So that's what I'm actually going to do now. I would like to try and set my camera up so that you can see what I'm doing. I don't know if it'll work, but let's try this. hopefully you could see that okay. And scrape the rest of this little bundle and see what I come up with, and I'll show you that later. Alright, so after scraping that little bundle, which was probably like 1 or 2 nettles worth of fiber in there, this is what I've come up with. It is pretty tangly in spots, and I think that's probably just because I didn't just like pick an end and go from there. I was working at it from both ends, so I won't do that next time. But yeah, can we just take a moment to appreciate, like, if this is from 1 or 2 nettles, this is the amount that I have already. And then can we just compare that to the amount of fiber I got from a huge bundle of stalks the first time I tried, and most of those fibers were like this long. And look at these fibers. Like they're long, and this is what it's supposed to be like, other than the tangliness. And also it's like not really the cleanest. Just a second. Oh, it's not gonna focus, but you can kind of see it's not like as clean or as scraped as it could be, but I'm overall pretty pleased, and I might try and scrape a few others before I just hang these up to dry. Okay, so you probably can't tell behind me, but it's raining right now, so I did not scrape any more fibers. I just got them hanging up to dry. I mean, they're probably not going to dry tonight because it's raining, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this second attempt at harvesting and beginning to process some nettles. I'll be back with another video later to talk about how the pool redding went this time, and I'll let you know if I did anything else with those other nettles that are partially processed green. Also, in case anyone is as concerned about my footwear as I am, I will tell you that today my rubber boots did keep my feet dry, so that was excellent. Alright, I'll see you next time.